So today's class, we are finishing up the topic on fluid movement, and we last class looked at fluid movement in cells, and today we're looking at fluid movement in plants. So plants have two types of vascular tissues that connect the roots to the leaves, and the first type is called the phloem tissue, and like the video had said last lesson, one way to remember it is they both start with the F sound. So phloem tissue transports foods like the sugars that are made in the leaves to the rest of the plant. And then we have the xylem tissue, and that one conducts water and minerals that are absorbed by the root cells to every cell in the plant. So when we look at this diagram, xylem tissue, like I said, conducts water from the roots to the rest of the plant. So notice xylem in the blue. For water, it's a one-way direction, all right, just from roots to the rest of the plant. Phloem tissue is going to carry sugars that are made in the leaves during photosynthesis, and it's going to carry it to the rest of the plant. So phloem, if you notice in the orange, the arrow is two-sided, so that means it's a two-way flow. All right, whereas xylem was only the one-way flow. All right, so from root to leaf, the roots have these structures called root hairs. So on a plant root, it's an extension of a single epidermal cell. So water can enter a root hair by osmosis. All right, so when the concentration of water in the soil is greater than the concentration of water in the root cell, the water is going to enter the root cell by osmosis. So again, from high concentration to low concentration. From the root hairs, water is going to pass from cell to cell by osmosis until it reaches the xylem tissue. The xylem tissue is made up of these tube-like cells. They have thick walls, and then they have these holes on either ends. They're very similar to drinking straws. So as more water enters the root hairs, it creates this pressure that pushes water up the plant through the xylem tissue. All right, so in this diagram, I'm just showing that they're tube-like cells. They have thick walls for strength. They have the open ends, which allows water to pass through freely. All right, next, we're going to talk about the leaves. You did learn about this a little bit in grade 7 as well. So leaves, this is where photosynthesis occurs. So the leaves are the plant's food-producing organs. So sugar gets made in the leaves from water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight. Most photosynthesis takes place in a layer of cells that are filled with chloroplasts. So a reminder that chloroplasts, those are the cells that contain chlorophyll, that green pigment that captures sunlight. So that layer of cells is called the palisade cells. When we look at the diagram, you'll also see the stomata. Those were the tiny openings on the underside of the leaf. Singular is called stoma, and that allows for gas exchange. So carbon dioxide can go in and oxygen can leave, but at the same time, water can escape as well through those openings. Then there were those guard cells that surround the stoma, and they can expand to close off the stoma. So here should be the diagram, structure of a leaf, right? So top layer of the leaf, sunlight. This is where sunlight is landing on the leaf. We have the waxy layer on top, the epidermis, and this is that layer I was talking about. This layer is called the palisade layer. And like I said, that palisade layer with the palisade cells, that's where most photosynthesis is taking place. So then we had the stomata, which was the opening. So there's an opening shown here. There's another opening shown here. And it's surrounded by the guard cells, which controls the opening of the stoma. So here we can see carbon dioxide is entering, but water is also leaving through the stoma, so water escapes. And then we see a vein here, that vascular tissue that we talked about. So that vein, it will include the xylem tissue and the phloem tissue. All right, just talking a little bit more about the stoma. or the stomata in plural, and the guard cells. So through that opening, gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen, they're able to enter and leave the plant through those openings, the stomata. And then guard cells, they surround the stoma, and they regulate how much comes and goes. So here in a microscopic image of a cell, we can see the guard cells. They kind of look like lips, and then the stoma would be the opening inside. Right over here, we can see when the guard cells are swollen, like so, then the stoma is open. And then when the guard cells shrink, then the stoma is closed. All right, and notice the other parts of the structures here as well. You see a vacuole, you see the nucleus, there's a cell wall, chloroplast, and so on. All right, one process we also have to talk about is called transpiration. So transpiration, that's the loss of water from a plant through evaporation. But that acts as a pump using osmosis to move water up the stem of the plant. So as water is lost through the open stoma, it will act as a pump to move water up the roots and up the stem of the plant. All right, so that's the next part here called pulling and pushing. So water particles, they're held together because they have this attraction between them. So water gets drawn into the root hairs by osmosis, and it pushes water columns up the plant. Then water is continuously being lost through the leaves by transpiration. So that process pulls water up the xylem tissues all the way from the roots. So these pushing and pulling actions, they raise the water up to the top of very tall trees. So if you think about it, trees, they're able to transport water without having a pumping organ such as, for example, a heart that humans and other animals have for transporting blood and minerals and so on throughout the body. Trees, they don't have that. They are just able to do that with this pull that is created by transpiration and osmosis.